I'm going to speak about my son, Chad Sullivan, and about before he was born, during his birth, what happened after his birth, and what happened at his death. Chad Sullivan was a beautiful little boy, and I loved him so much. I was living in Salt Lake, and I left my husband, and I moved down to Provo to be with my mother and my father to help take care of their house because they were in Clawson, Utah, in some property they had bought and had a trailer there because my father worked at the Castle Dill power plant working on that. And so I stayed with my mom and dad for a little while in their house. And I got a job at the state hospital in Provo. I was a psych tech, or psych aide, and worked with the people that were really bad off, that were really schizophrenic, bipolar, you name it, people that had multiple personalities and things like that. So I got a job there, and I had been there a couple of months, and I remember going out to sit in the lobby because my partner went to lunch. And I remember sitting there reading a book, and all of a sudden, I get slapped. Something slapped me. It scared me. So I called for my partner to come back, be with me, and I told her what happened. So I went home one night after work, and I went to sleep. And I woke up, and I saw this person, a young boy, all in white. And I remember he had blonde hair. At the time, I don't remember what he looked like. I just knew he was a young boy. And he had blonde hair, and he had a long white gown on, like what you would have when you graduate, but this was white. And I could see his hands, and his feet were bare. I looked at him, and he pointed at me, and he said, "Straighten up your life." Whoa. That was interesting that I saw that. And a couple of months later, I found out I was pregnant. So when I carried my other two kids, I had a back problem. And the back problem was a disc in the lower disc of my back, the fifth lumbar disc. So I worked carrying him like that, with having a lot of pain. And it was a lot of pain. And so I remember I was almost due, and I was at work, and the main psych tech that was there, it's about 7 o'clock at night, and he said, "You need to go home right now. You don't look very good." So I got in my car, and I drove home. And by this time, I was living in an apartment, by myself with my two children, Chuck and Wendy. So my mom was there attending them when I got home. And so I went to the bathroom, and I started hemorrhaging and bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. So I found something to protect the blood, but it was still bleeding throughout my clothes everywhere. But I told my mom to call an ambulance. I got dressed again in something else, and then I heard the ambulance coming, and they came, and they got me and put me in the ambulance. And I remember on the ride over there, I was thinking, "Oh my gosh, is my baby okay?" And the blood just kept gushing and gushing and gushing. And I got to the hospital, and the doctor was waiting for me in the delivery room. And I remember him saying that we're going to take an ultrasound of your baby. And so they did. And then they took me right into the operating room, and the placenta was detaching from my baby. And so I remember they put me under, and I was under, but a few minutes later, it was like I was awake, but it was all dark, and I could see the veins in my eyes, and I was looking through the veins in my eyes. I could see the doctor, and I can understand what was going on. And so I remember leaving my body, and I was up in the corner of the room at the hospital, and I looked down, and I could see the doctor, and I could see about 8 people around me, and I don't know why there's so many people around me, but so what happened was I saw a nurse that had long blonde hair, and she had hair straighter, kind of down to her shoulders, kind of like mine, but straighter. And she said, "It's a boy." Well, at that time, I left. I went somewhere, and I don't remember where I went, but I feel like my son had told me that we talked about whether he was going to stay or not. And the doctor had told my mother that we were dying and that there was nothing he could do for us. And so he got my brother and she got my brother and my grandfather to give us a blessing. And my brother said that I was talking during this, but I don't remember because maybe my body was there, but my spirit was not there. It was not in the hospital at that time. So the next thing I remember was I was walking back and I saw these curtains. They were white. My dad thinks that was the veil. And maybe it was. I don't know. Or maybe it was the curtains in the hospital. I don't know. So I was walking towards the curtains and I lifted my left hand to open the curtain. And I thought, wow, this is my hand. This is my spirit hand. We really do have a spirit outside our body. We do. So then I opened up the curtain with my hand and I was inside my body. I went in my crown chakra. I don't remember the pain or anything like that, but I do remember the feeling of being cold, and I was in shock. Very bad shock. It was really bad. I said to my Mom, I need a blanket. I'm so cold. And she says, you have 5 on you anyway. And so she did get me another blanket. And I was in shock for about 4 hours. I couldn't stop shaking. And I guess they came and gave me something to help me sleep. And so after I woke up, and the next day, the doctor came in to me and he said, you had quite an experience. And I said, yes, I did. I should have asked him what he saw and what happened, but I didn't because I didn't know for sure what that was that I had a near-death experience. So I was told that my back was in really bad shape and that I needed to have surgery. Well, I hadn't seen my son though yet. He was a boy, and I didn't know what condition he was in. They just said he had to stay in the intensive care for a few more days. And then they told me I was going to have a surgery. So the night before my surgery, they brought Chad into me. He was the cutest little thing with blonde hair. He was so adorable. And he was doing a little bit better, but they had taken the IVs out of his head. And so I got to visit with him for about 15 minutes, and then they came and got him. And then the next morning, they took me into surgery, and they took my fifth lumbar disc out, and I remember the pain was horrible, and I couldn't hardly stand it. It's the worst pain I've ever been through in my life. It's like the medicine. It's like the Darvon they gave me didn't even work. All it would do was put me to sleep, and then I would wake up and have that pain again. So my friend came to the hospital. I had her pick up my son and her mother, and they took him while I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I'd lost a lot of blood, and they were trying to get me stable and have blood transfusions and that to keep me alive during this time. And so it was time for me to go home, and I went home, and my girlfriend brought me my son, and I had the 2 kids with me, but I had no help, and I was on crutches, and I just remember laying in bed and how he was so beautiful, and my other kids were so wonderful, and they helped me, and Chuck would help. They would clean the house as best as they could, and my daughter Wendy would help me take a bath. And so that's what happened with my son. Later on, my husband and I, we got married again, and his mother bought us a house helped us buy a house in Fayway Drive off 11th East in Sandy. So we stayed there for a while, and Alfie, Chad's friend, came to stay with us, and because his parents were in Arizona and he wanted to stay in school, and the kids were like in junior high and 9th grade, so he would go to school together with my daughter. And but when Chad was small, I remember that we were at a wedding, my cousin's wedding, and I'll probably go back and forth on my stories, but we were at a wedding, and I had bought Chad. My husband had bought Chad a Michael Jackson jacket, and it was red. So the band was playing at the wedding, and so he walked up and he asked the people if they would stop the music and play a song for him. So he got in the middle of the floor, and they started to play the song "Beat It" by Michael Jackson, and he did a moonwalk dance, and he did it perfectly. I didn't know he could dance like that. I was so busy working and helping taking care of the kids, I just didn't know all the things that Chad did. He was a remarkable kid and very smart. And then he got lost at the fair. We went to the fair, and he got lost at the fair. So I remember when my husband died, Chad was very sick, and he told me that his dad had been there talking to him. And since then, I knew what I found out what they were talking about. So he had died, and Chad was very, very sick. And I remember about what he said about his dad being with him. And so I remember my daughter Amanda said, "Mom, I was in the house sitting there playing whatever games they played, Nintendo or something at that time." And she said, "I heard Dad come into the house from the garage. I could hear his cowboy boots, and he walked downstairs. And he was there a lot with us, trying to keep track of the kids, too." And then my daughter Susie and I, we were there and watching TV, and all of a sudden we hear the dog barking. The door opens. We hear the cowboy boots walking downstairs. So we heard it too. So he was there a lot with us. And because after he died, I asked him to come and be with the kids. That's exactly what he did. So after Denny died, it was really hard. Keeping the house together, and Chad would have all his friends over the place, and there's lots of friends, lots and lots of friends. And he said, "Mom, can I have a party?" only a few people. I said, okay. I was going to a church dance. And so I went to the dance and I came back and there was graffiti painted on my ceilings and on my walls. I was upset, if you could imagine. And he said, Mom, I couldn't control it. These gang members came in and they came to the party. They heard about it. So they came. And what I didn't know was these gang members had a sister that she had taken her father's checkbook and with her and the boys. The boys went with her and they spent money. They spent the money on things for the kids they wanted. And so one night, one day I was at work and I think his name was Pokin and his friend came over into the house and they had guns and they threatened the boys that they needed to pay back that money or they were going to kill them. I didn't know about this stuff. I never knew about it. But so during that time, I would get calls from my cousin and she'd say, Mom, she'd say, Gwen, I'm sorry, but Chad's in trouble. I go, what did he do? Well, he has been caught smoking outside the school, area where there was trees and stuff. And so, he got suspended for school for a little while. And then another time my cousin called me up and she said, Gwen, Chad's in trouble again, but not as bad as the last time. I said, okay, what happened? He said there was a handicapped kid in school and Chad told him to quit hitting the boy. And so the boy said no, and he hit Chad. And so Chad beat him up. And then so he got suspended for 1 day. And that boy got suspended for 2 weeks. But what I had told Chad was, I said, don't you ever beat up any or make fun of any children that are just handicapped. You have cousins that are, and it's not their fault. And so he listened and remembered what I said. Even though it was wrong, he still stood up for that little kid. And then I get another phone call from my cousin, and she says, Gwen, Chad's in trouble again. I go, what did he do this time? She says, he can't get out of it this time. I said, and tell me what it is. She said, well, there was a cop outside in his car, and Chad mooned the cop. So then he got suspended for that for about a week. And there were a lot of things that he did that he got kicked out of school for. I remember times they were drugs. I remember had to go to court, and I remember seeing chains on his hands and feet as he went into court, and that hurt me. It was so hard because I didn't know all the things they were doing because I was working, and they would take my car at night. I didn't know they'd take my car, but so one night I guess I went to sleep, and they took my car, and Chad and Alfie went to their neighbor's house, and they stole the guns from the house of the neighbors. I don't know, maybe the boy was there and let them do it. I don't know. I don't know who the boy was. So, they stole the gun, and so the next morning I was taking Chad to work. He was working at the terrace at the airport, and he a few days later he was going to be a waiter. So I brought home this white shirt, and it had little white buttons, small buttons on it, and pleats on each side. And so I thought that was pretty cool. But that day I took him to work. It was different this time when I dropped him off. He said, Mom, I want you to know how much I loved you. And always remember how much I loved you. And then he hugged me. He got out of the car and went to work. And so I went to work. I ran a beauty salon called Dimensional Cuts. And I got through with my work, and it was about somewhere around 6 o'clock, and I was driving home. I was almost home, and I was on the road, and I heard close to my house, and I heard a fire engine. So I knew it was right behind me. I turned right into the street where I lived and pulled up at my house, and then the ambulance pulled up at my house. So I didn't know what happened. I got out of my car. I started going to the house to go in the house, and my son-in-law said, "No, Gwen, you can't come in. Chad's been shot in the head, and you can't come in." So it was like slow motion, and I fell down. I fell down on my knees, just crying. Someone took me, some neighbor took me and took my shoulders and pulled me up. I don't even remember who it was. And then that I was told that Life Flight was coming, and that the church was big enough. It was on the corner of the 8600 South and Lindsay's, and the helicopter was coming, and I heard the helicopter coming. I still was outside as they brought him out. They brought him out in the gurney or the bed they put them on to take them to the helicopter. So they took him to the helicopter. And I watched him, and he was covered with a sheet, and I had something on to protecting his head where they bandaged his head. So I watched as they took him in the helicopter away. And so I walked back to my house. I don't remember who was with me. I just remember them bringing Alfie out. And he said, he was all bloody, and police were bringing him out in front of me. And he said, "I'm sorry, Gwen. I didn't mean to shoot you." I said, "I know, honey." And the cops told me to be quiet and shoved Alfie in the car, in the cop car. And they took him around for hours until he showed them where he got the gun. They got the guns from. So I was told that what happened was when I was at work and my son was at work, the boys took the guns and they went to Kennecott when the boys had some property. And they went to Kennecott and they were target practicing with the guns. You know, I don't know all the whole story. I haven't talked to some of the boys about it. But that day I went to the hospital. The neighbor took me to the hospital, LDS Hospital. And I went in, and the doctor knew I was coming, I guess. And he said, "I'm sorry, but your son is brain dead." So I went into his room and saw him. He looked very peaceful, sleeping there. His head was bandaged. He had a ventilator in him, helping him breathe, and I could see him breathing. It was going up and down like that. So I went out there to the waiting room where all my family were. Chad's friends were there. My family was there. We talked and then talked for a little while. And everybody went in and saw Chad and said their last goodbyes. And so I asked if I could be alone with Chad. So everybody left, and there were some people waiting for me in the waiting room. My son and my daughters and other children were there. Everyone else had left, so I went in to see Chad. And I looked at him. I said, "I love you, Chad." I always remember that. I touched his head, kissed his cheek. And I touched his arms and his legs and his feet. Because that was the last time I was ever going to be able to do that. I wanted to remember him. And so when I got through, I heard a voice. And the voice was very gentle, and it was a man's voice. And it was up towards the ceiling. And the voice said, that was your son Chad that came to you that night in your room. And then that picture, that whole picture of what happened that night came back. And I remembered what he looked like. And he looked just like this picture. The blonde hair. And Chad was 17 at that time. And I'll never forget God's voice. And he was there to comfort me. So after my son brought me and my daughter Susie from the hospital to the house that was given to my kids after their dad died, there was no one in there at the time. So Susie and I went there and stayed the night. And she cried herself to sleep. And it was very, very difficult. And then we stayed there a couple of days, and then we came home. And when we came close to the house, there was these stone fences that are on the side of the road going into our house. And it said, "Rest in peace, Chad." And that was really hard, seeing that. But then I had to go down and pick out the caskets and get everything ready for Chad's funeral. So which we did, and all my kids came down. And so I did everything for his funeral and the obituary and that. And it was going to be at the church where helicopter went. So had everything ready, and it was time for the funeral. And my dad was alive still. He had cancer and he was dying. In the room where you do the prayer, family prayer, and my dad said, "Gwen, Chad's standing right behind me." And so they were going to say the prayer, so I went over and I held Chad's hand during the prayer. It was warm. He was holding my hand. And so then we went and had his funeral, and it was really good. And then we went to the mortuary and had the family prayer. And after that, there were so many boys, children, kids from high school. There must have been 150 kids there. And I walked up to them and I said, you guys, you kids that are doing things you're not supposed to do, you need to stop. Because if you don't, you could end up like Chad. And the other kids did end up like Chad. And then one of them went on a mission. So this is very hard. So we had his funeral, and my sister was up to stay the night, and she had 2 daughters, twins, Shauna and Katrina, and another Jeremy and Crystal stayed there that night. And and during the night, I heard the basketball bouncing at the neighbor's house for Chad would go and play basketball in practice. And I knew it was him. He was letting me know that he was there with me. And then the next morning, one of the twins said, "Well, you know how Chad used to rock his head back and forth to sleep?" She said, "He was rocking me back to sleep because I was so upset." And then later on, they went home, and my sister called me, and she says, "Gwen, Chad's here. He keeps coming. I keep seeing him. He's in and out of the trailer." And the neighbors asking me, "What is that white light that keeps coming in and out of your trailer?" So she told Chad, "You need to go. You need to go home." So I went out. They put Alfie in DT, and so I was able to go see him about 3 weeks, and I visited with him. He was so sad. He said, "They're calling me a murderer." I said, "Honey, don't you believe them?" He said, "You're not a murderer. You're not." And so it was time for court. It was like a week later, and I went with my son and my kids to court. And I remember walking up the stairs in Sandy Court. There's some stairs that go up to the courtrooms. And so I remember a man saying, "Oh, I don't think the lady, the mother, is going to let me do this." And then I got in the courtroom and I realized he was the prosecuting attorney on Al's case. So all his friends were there, and all my family was there, and the judge, said this is a homicide, and do you plead guilty for the homicide? And Alfie said yes, and then he pled guilty. And judge hadn't. He says, before I put sentence on Alfie, is there anyone that wants to say anything? And I said, I do. I'm Chad's mother. And so I stood up and I said, Chad and Alfie were brothers and they loved each other. And I know that Alfie would never have shot him on purpose. And so I said, if you need to charge him for the guns, do that. But don't send him to prison, because he's in his own prison. He's getting his own prison for the rest of his life because of what happened. So the judge did exactly what I said. And so what I didn't tell you was, a couple of weeks before Chad died, was that, we had gone on a vacation, not a vacation, but we went up to a lake on North Salt Lake. I don't know what one it was. And so my brother had these banana boats, and all the kids had so much fun. That's the last memory that was really fun. I remember everybody, Alfie was with us, how much fun we had. And so I did move to Florida a couple years. I didn't know where Alfie was. I knew he was in California. I'm not in Arizona with his parents, so I didn't think about bringing him with me. I feel bad that I didn't bring him with me. But anyway, a Chad came to me one night. It was shortly after he died, and I was with him somewhere. I can't remember. I can only remember that we talked for hours and hours. And then he said, "Mom, you're going to love it here. It's beautiful here." He said, "Remember that I love you, and I will see you again." So it had been so many years since Chad died. I think 25 years. And a friend of mine said, you need to put Chad's picture underneath your pillow. So I did that, and I put Chad's picture underneath my pillow, and nothing happened. So I kept it under my pillow. And then the next night I heard, "Mom, it's Chad. Mom, it's Chad." And I heard his voice. I was so happy that I heard from him after all those years. And then it was maybe a year later, I would do these videos, swap faces with Chad's picture in Star Wars videos. And so I did videos of him, and he was older in those pictures. So I did them, and it was so cute. And one night, I felt someone tap me on the shoulder, and it was Chad, dressed in a Star Wars uniform. I think that he's having a good time. Maybe there's Star Wars. Maybe he's doing that. Maybe he's doing things like that. But I do know what he's doing. I know that he left the earth so he could help other children that died in traumatic ways like he did. And so he could take them to the light. And he's happy with what he's doing. And one night, also, I moved in Brandon Terrace. It was like 2014, and I just moved in there. And my son-in-law said, Gwen, Chad's going to come and see you tonight. He said he's with your sister. They hang out together because my sister died at birth. And I actually had seen my sister. She had long brown hair, curly hair, and I watched her walk through the walls. But then he told me, he said, you're going to hear a tone, and when you hear the tone, you're going to know that Chad's going to come to you. So I heard that tone. I went in my bedroom. I put a candle on the table. I lit it, turned out the lights, and I sat on the bed. And then I could feel someone's arms around me. It was Chad, and he held me for a few minutes, and I could feel his love. And these things happen. This is a true story of what happened to my son. I don't know if I remember everything, but I remember talking with Alfie about a year ago. He called me and he said, we never talked about what happened. He says, Gwen, I'm sorry. He says, thank you for what you did. You saved my life. I said, I did it. I wanted to do it. I said, but I need to tell you something. Chad came to me a few weeks before he died. He said, Gwen, if anything happens, please take care of Alfie. And I said, what are you talking about, Chad? He said, Mom promised me to take care of Alfie. And I told him that. And he says, I wish you would have told me that. And I wish I would have too, because I haven't really seen him since then. And I painted a portrait of Chad for him for Christmas. And I texted him. He said he was going to come and get it, but he didn't. So I haven't seen him for about a year now. And I miss him. I hope he'll come to see me because I love him. And so do my kids. Anyway, thank you for listening to my story. And if anybody has anything to say, you can ask me any questions that you want to say. Thank you.